38. How many loaves do you have? We are St. Paul Lutheran Church, sp815.org is how you find a map to get to us. We are of the UAC, that's a unaltered Augsburg Confession. We are of the LCMS, a mouthful, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. There's an LCMS way, there's an ELCA way, and they are diverse. They are not in harmony. We, like them, they would say, are pro grace, but from there the ways part. We are pro grace and pro Bible, pro marriage, pro family, and pro life in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And then here at St. Paul, we focus that on being a Psalms praying, Proverbs reading, red letter following Protestant Christian congregation of believers in Jesus Christ because he is risen. He is risen indeed. Alleluia. And every year we work to remember that we are set apart for discipleship and giving as the kingdom of God. We focus our time Sunday mornings on reading the Bible together, generally line by line, but also with instruction. Today, pulling these pieces together, Mark chapter 6, Ruth, the whole book, but what you heard, chapters 1 and 2, and then, I mean, how do you ignore the stuff about marriage? And he doesn't use the word divorce right away, but he does talk about divorce, right? In the story about Ruth, you're kind of dealing with marriage, and in that story, you're dealing with the famine of bread, where the people don't have enough food. And in the story from Mark, Jesus is giving bread to the people and making commands as a king. And I can jump from there to this king calling you his bride in the new covenant of his flesh and blood, by which he consummates and has consummated and shall ever consummate his love for you as us with him. So piecing that together line by line may not work this week, but I'm going to try by starting with Mark, because that is where we want to focus. If you haven't noticed, I preach two different sermons every week at St. Paul, one for 30 minutes at this service and one for 45 minutes at the late service. And they're both available at Spotify and at YouTube. We're currently getting in upwards of 2,000 to 3,000 views on these sermons. This is new. I think it's post 2020 unblackballing of Christians by rule of law, actually from higher corners than, is my pay grade, but it's happening. So these things are being seen. And there are then two completely different teachings going out to you every single week. You at the early service are getting the gospel. You are getting the red letters. You are getting the way of Jesus Christ. At the late service, which on our website says family service, and if you go, you'll see why, even though we definitely have families here this morning, and that's a good thing. Uh, at that service, we've been focusing on the epistle reading. So every week they're getting 45-minute Bible study in church with kids on whatever we had in the lectionary, and it's been First Corinthians for some time. How do we tie that together as a people now? How do we consider being not a disparate group, but members of a unified body who are married together here in this covenant? That's my question for you this morning. I don't want you to make a decision for Jesus that hasn't already been made for you in your baptism. I want you to understand the decision for Jesus that was made for you in your baptism, and to see that it is more than memorization, but it's not without memorization. It's more than law, but it's not without law. It's not more than the gospel. Everything's the good news now. How many loaves do you have? Ruth went down to Moab. Excuse me. Elimelech went down to Moab because there was not enough bread in the land of the covenant. During the time of the judges, when each man's kind of doing as he sees fit, and if you read the book more and more, the women are ruling over the men more and more. Elimelech, whose name means "my God is king," leaves the land of his king with his wife, whose name means beautiful, like just she's awesome, kind of. Naomi, she's awesome. Uh, They go down to Moab, which we've been learning about Moab and Ammon recently. This is the two inheritors of Lot, Abraham's nephew. And then in that, their names Moab, my father, and or of my father, as the daughter named him. It was all kind of gross. And then Ammon, my uncle, my brother's my uncle, kind of stuff. It's gross. Again, these two people groups now are well over the whole southeastern end of what is outside the Holy Land, and they're doing well enough that when my king is God and beautiful don't have bread from their king, they go down to my father's people. And they go with their sons. Their sons are named Weakling and Struggling, something like that. Weakling and Pitiful. Killian's a little tougher to translate than Charon, I think it is. I forget his how to pronounce it. But those two meanings, their sons don't match their names. Something's amiss, something's wrong, and they're leaving the land of covenant. That's not good for bread, for bread. Verse 30 of Mark 6, the apostles gathered to Jesus and told him all things, both what they had done and what they had taught. That's going to be connected to what came before, the empowering Jesus is doing of his disciples. You, as a freed man in Christ, are empowered to speak the word of God wherever you are. And ladies, you're included when I say freed man in Christ. You're able to memorize the Bible and know what it means and live in a world where it will have value coming out of your mouth, just like these men came back and told him about all the stuff that was going on when they just trusted what he said and started to say it to others. Scatter the seed, leave the tares, buy that field, those kinds of things, right? Or the things it says about marriage in the Proverbs, or the things it says about money in the Proverbs, or the prayers for the cry of your heart in the Psalms. They come back, they tell him how great his word is. Verse 31, and he said to them, I love this red letter. This is one of those ones that challenges you. If you're a red letter reader, what do you do with this? Is the only verse you get from Jesus today. You read a psalm, you read one proverb, and you read this verse. Come aside by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while. That's the gospel of Jesus Christ. I mean, let it sink in. Come aside by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while. What are you doing this morning? Why are you here? Who else is here on this hilltop? What's this hilltop without this building you put up? What are we doing here? Rest. What's the seventh day for? Rest. What's the promise we get to enter? Rest. Where's the rest? In your soul, in your heart. When you remember what I said over there earlier, there's nothing more you have to do. There's nothing to fix. It's going to be like this tomorrow. But it's not as bad as everyone else thinks, because death is just more rest. Now, come aside by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while. That's what I got this week out of that one. It's a beautiful challenge to see wisdom in the red letters. You don't always feel it right away. You're like, I don't get it. That's the point. That's called learning. Don't run away from learning. Don't despise the challenge. They were coming and going. He's thinking of them. They're working too hard. They're doing what they're told. They believe. They're not to be shamed for their believing. They're to be given rest. And they didn't even have time to eat. How is it, I could use the mother as the virtue example here for sure. Who will be the last to eat? Even if she's not eating all day. It's not my family, it's every family. Right? Who will be the last to eat? You don't think of yourself. Why? Because you're a good person. Well, but then that's actually bad for you eventually. That's why we all need the protection of a king who can tell us to rest. So they don't have time to eat. They're working too hard. He said, let's go eat. They depart to a deserted place in a boat by themselves to rest, but to eat. Verse 33, the multitude saw them departing. This is a big idea in Mark, these multitudes, but the crowds are huge, right? The crowds are huge. Many knew him and ran there on foot from all the cities. So this is a mixed crowd. It's Lollapalooza, 0 AD or 33 AD. And be 30. Goodness, Jonathan. The crowds got people that have piercings and tattoos and eat pig and all sorts of weirdness, whatever you can imagine the weirdness can be. They're all coming together because of what he's saying and the fact that anybody who's got a demon doesn't afterwards, and the fact that if you've really got a serious illness, he'll deal with it. So they're following him to a deserted place. And he'll say at one point, "Don't do that. Now that I'm ascended to heaven, don't follow a teacher to the desert. Don't do it." Yeah. It's happened in history. Christians are to be called out, like I said, come aside and rest in this side that's not with the city. But that doesn't mean go away from the world and become something that's out of the world. We can't do that. That's very important. Jesus is going to engage everything around him rather than try to isolate as a form of protectionism for his word and his people. This is the cross as a power embraced as a strategy for military planning, which he'll show in the way he has people sit down. It's a kingdom, even though violence is not our weapon. It's a kingdom. Verse 34. Jesus, when he came out, saw a great multitude, and what's the king do? His spleen falls out. If you've ever heard Matt Harrison preach on spleen, so this is the word. His entire gut is just falling out of him in mercy. I think that's the Greek at work. Uh, he's moved with compassion. His heart's moved because they're like sheep not having a shepherd. And I don't know how to say that, teach that without sounding a bit pedantic or like I'm above you all, because like technically, I'm on a podium, right? I'm really above you all at the moment in the most literal way. And then I am your shepherd by call and ordination and all these things. And so there is this thing that happens to you when you're in this job long enough that you see people, and I'm not really thinking of you in the pew. I mean, you're here because you know the good shepherd. It's you just start to see people who aren't really evil, but don't know Jesus. They don't hate God, but they don't know God either. And you're in their life and they're not ready for you to like tell them about the kingdom just yet, but you can tell they're sheep without a shepherd. I don't think you need to be a pastor to see that. You're sheep with a shepherd. I'm not really your shepherd. That's the danger of taking what I said the wrong way. There's a right way of what I said, there's a wrong way of what I said. I'm your shepherd, but I'm your under shepherd. God be praised, I pray, I'm not your hireling. Right? But that doesn't make me the good shepherd who lays down his life for the sheep, who will die at the wolf's jaw, although I have given oath I'll try. Uh, And so, it's this interesting place. What's a pastor after all? Just a man of God who stands in front and talks so that you may see it and become so yourself. Uh, Okay, so sheep not having a shepherd. I went off a little on that. He began to teach them many things, right? That's what he does. He opens the words. He opens the words. We'll just leave that there. When the day was now far spent, his disciples come and turn in the story. His disciples came to him, said, "This is a deserted place, and already the hour is late. Send them away that they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat." And how well do I know this feeling of thinking that if I were to try to share what I have, I won't have any? I know that feeling like the back of my heart. I don't like that feeling, but I know that feeling. And if you think I'm hospitable or generous in any way, God be praised. I work with discipline against my heart to try to act upon the principle that is Jesus is showing right here, which is that there's always enough food. There's always enough food for today. That's the principle. Wherever greed is in your heart for mammon, for money, for dollars, for anything, it's actually just because you don't believe that. Deep down somewhere, you piled a bunch of other stories between the two, but it's your fear of not having bread that's the issue. The ancient word for king comes from the idea and the root of the word. A king is the man with the bread, finally. That's what he was, that's what he is. He builds a wall. and a barn to protect his bread. And so if you're Ruth, you go to the guy with the biggest barn and you try to hide in the corner and get some out of the garbage can, right? Only in Israel, it's better than that because they have laws to protect the poor, like the gleaning stuff, which I won't have time to get into today. But the Levitical codes and the numbers codes for how to run a financial covenant are beautiful. They're beautiful beyond imagination. They make our banks look like thieves, which that is slavery. So there is that. Um, back to the text. Back to the man with the bread. Back to the man with the insight to see there's always enough, and being the God who knows he can make more, wanting to demonstrate that really once and for all. And in this way, kind of an aside here, but it's a very important one. Um, the resurrection of Jesus Christ is the sign of Jonah. When he says, "No sign will be given to prove to people what I say is true, except my resurrection, my empty tomb," he means it. Underneath that, there's only one other miracle that's in all four gospels. It's this one. That's that's something right there. John doesn't play like the others, but the others have random things that come in sometimes too. They're not always saying the same story. They're looking at it from the different direction. They're adding a piece here and there. They all make sure the feeding of the 5,000 is at the center of the book. So there's a lot going on here that I'm just wanting to like tap for you, right? I want you to see that underneath there's a geyser ready to come out of bread and blood and marriage, famine, kingdom. These aren't foreign words to your actual life. They are foreign to the myth of the age. Uh, Putting these words in your actual life will make you wiser than the people of this age. Living according to the words of the Bible is salvation. All right, back to again, he says, then, verse 37, you give them something to eat. All right. You have the power. You are you. It's not a promise, or can I say your best life now? It's not a promise for financial capacity just because you think you should have it. It's that you don't have to do more. Do what you can do. This isn't so you can be saved. This is not the assurance of faith. This is because faith is assured at the cross. Faith is assured in your baptism. So now you can let go of that part of your heart that is always saying, I got to fix it. It doesn't mean you won't stop fixing things. You're going to fix things. You might enjoy it even more since you don't have to. Now you can take your time. Do it well. Do it for the Lord as opposed to doing it for men. You give them something to eat. That's verse 37. It continues. And they said to him, shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread? They think about the money. That's what we do. If you don't know that's what you do, you're lying to yourself. We all do it as monkeys. Okay. We have God. God made us. We're not monkeys, but like monkeys, we worship money and don't know it. Like monkeys do what they do and don't know it. And until you know that and start saying, that's what I do, watch for it, take notes, stop that, you're going to do it. Especially in this world where all the messages say debt is not slavery, debt is freedom. Again, that's a deep moment. Do you remember though? Anybody? Green hymnal, maybe? Might be in the blue one. When they changed the words of the Lord's Prayer for a moment to forgive us our debts. It didn't go very well, and I'm not going to bring it back, but there's something there you shouldn't miss. That is what it's about. It's not about going in his yard, it's about holding his debts over his head. Now, he says to them, how many loaves do you have? Right? Verse 38. Go and see. And from there, I want to think about Ruth again for a moment and how many loaves she got to bring back to Naomi. I'm not going to go through the whole story. You heard it read. I want to build on what you know now. That when Ruth refuses to leave the relationship she has with her toxic mother in law, who then, after she insists on staying to take care of her old body, gives her the silent treatment, will not speak to her anymore until days, months later, when they're back, and then there she's going to get food. And even then, you can't imagine, don't imagine it's a healthy relationship But Ruth's faith in Jesus Christ, which she invokes by his name, is a stunning declaration of her conversion to our religion through marriage. That when she married this man, Kilian, she took his God and she wasn't messing around. And as she heard whatever they told of the God Yahweh, who is Jesus Christ, she believed it with all her heart. And she invested in that for the sake of this mother in law who did not deserve it. And what she gets as a result is that a man named He strengthens, who will be the grandfather of David and whose name also is one of the pillars in the temple, He strengthens, will take notice of her because he falls in love. Just like Jesus is in love with his creation and has no desire to see it burn, but also isn't just going to pull it into the bedroom right away either. So Boaz will woo Ruth through careful and gentle, fatherly understanding applied to his entire people. And again, I commend this to you as an image of what's in Jesus' heart as he's handing out bread, not only back then on that hill, but this morning with the wine by my hand, but not by my power. As his institution, his covenant with you, that you are his and he is yours. How many loaves do you have? Go and see. How much bread do you want with the rest of the world? How many things do you need? They find out 5 and 2 fish. And with just a moment more here, maybe I do want to tell this story. It's the way that my life works. And when it fell out this morning on my family, I just couldn't help but chuckle. And now I'm going to embarrass them a little bit by sharing it even more. But so this morning, we found out that we had left out a little bit of meat overnight that we'd intended to have for breakfast. And okay, fine, we got other food, right? Well, yeah, we try to eat sardines; they're good for you. And so you have a bunch of sardines in the closet. I guess we get sardines for breakfast. Here we go. There's only 2 cans of sardines in the closet, and my mind went straight to it. Here's our 2 fish for 7 people. Uh, I had a milkshake made of half and half, blah blah. But the idea here is that the Bible is in my life, so that when I saw that happen, I thought of a story, and it made me smile. And I don't think that's Jonathan Fisk's personality or skill set or anything like that. I think that's the free gift of God of faith in Jesus Christ. And my task always here will be to impart that to you in spirit and understanding from the text itself, trying to weave together as much as I can, but knowing that it's never enough. I'm not going to finish it either. I have to rest and trust that the supper is our covenant, not my voice, finally. Uh, let's at least finish the Mark text, though, before I close. Okay, so he says in verse 40, verse 39, I mentioned the military stuff, right? He commanded, didn't ask, he commanded them, who? The apostles, to make them sit down in groups on the green grass. Mark's the only one who ever mentions it's green. Strange. Verse 40, they sit down in those ranks in hundreds and fifties. This calls up images of Israel encamping in the desert from the Exodus story and from Deuteronomy and Joshua. It is definitely military imagery, and you can understand why the Sadducees and the Pharisees might start asking questions about this stuff. The best place I've ever seen this kind of people in a movie is in Spartacus at the end. And so if you remember that as well, think of that moment and that power. They really filmed that many guys in one place and what that's like. It's not quite like a Super Bowl, a little different. So they're all lined up. They're all ready to go. And verse 41, and when he had taken the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, it makes 7 total. He looked up to heaven, blessed and broke the loaves. Here, the Lord's Supper there, it's a shadow, and gave them to his disciples to set before them. There's the apostles serving as pastors, handing out the Lord's Supper. And the 2 fish he divided among them all. Uh, I want to know the difference between 5 and 2. Numerology is a challenge, it's a riddle. I can tell you about the 7, I can tell you about the 12. The difference between the 5 and 2, I don't want to preach on just yet, but it's a riddle. It's right there. Uh, they all ate, verse 43. They were all filled. That means satisfied. No one felt sick. No one was gluttonous. It was great. This was good. And they took up 12 baskets full of fragments and of the fish. So seven is again holy. It is the number of rest, the Sabbath day, the number of oath, number of the week, all these things. So from that holy thing, he feeds these 12, excuse me, these 5,000. We're going to get to that number in a moment. Five is the number of incompletion. It's good, it's a building block, but by itself, it's a bit of an odd nose. And so five and then 1,000, that's 10 times 10 times 10. So 10 is completion. And three times is God's number, Father, Son, and Spirit. It's the simplest way just to know that. So 5,000 is God's completion of incompletion, which explains why you need another feeding in the book of Mark a little bit. But then that 5,000, that incomplete group, they're being brought into holiness by the meal. And when it's done, they're not five, but 12, these 12 baskets taken up. And that's Israel. That's the number of the church. That's the number of God's kingdom going past 10. It's better than 11. And the joke's even there. And God wrote it before they made it on TV. That's the numerology of the Bible. The words are just words that are true. They should never replace what the text says, but they do enhance it because those numbers are real numbers. And they're also then, as I said, with the number seven, is the word oath, it's the word week, a bunch of things like that in the Old Testament. All right. So from the numbers, now those who had eaten were about 5,000 men to you. You, not 5,000, but just enough. Not the strongest military, but the right people set down in your orders with the bread from the hand of the good shepherd to make you his and give you rest today.